In a quiet Texas courtroom, the air was thick with tension. 17-year-old Marcus Carter sat silently, his hands trembling under the weight of chains that shouldn't have been there. His mother, tears streaming down her face, clutched a crumpled tissue, whispering prayers under her breath. The jury had deliberated for less than an hour. Now all eyes were on the judge. The room held its breath as the gavel struck. 70 years in state prison. The words hit like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed. Marcus's mother let out a muffled sob. His lawyer stood frozen in disbelief. Even the bailiff, a man who had seen it all, shifted uncomfortably. Marcus, who had never so much as stolen a piece of candy, was sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. But here's the thing, Marcus was innocent. A case built on shaky evidence, a witness who wasn't sure, a system that wasn't made to protect him. Everything had worked against Marcus from the start. And now his future had been stolen. The judge barely looked at him. To him, Marcus was just another case number, another statistic. As the guards led him away, Marcus's mind raced. How could this happen? How could the truth not matter? But little did he know, this was just the beginning. Because what he was about to discover, inside the very prison walls meant to break him, would change everything. And the man who put him there, he was about to learn a lesson he never saw coming. As the prison gates slammed shut behind him, Marcus felt the weight of his new reality settle in. The towering walls, the constant hum of voices, the sharp stares of inmates sizing him up. It was a world he never imagined being part of. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't supposed to be here. But none of that mattered anymore. Back home, his mother refused to accept the verdict. She knocked on doors, called lawyers, begged anyone to listen. But the system moved slowly, and the world kept turning. To them, Marcus was just another case, another number. But to her, he was everything. Inside, Marcus quickly learned that survival meant keeping his head down. But that didn't stop trouble from finding him. One evening in the chow hall, a group of older inmates surrounded him. Fresh meat, one of them smirked, cracking his knuckles. Marcus braced himself, but before a single punch was thrown, an older man stepped in. His name was Elijah, a man who had spent more years inside than Marcus had been alive. With just a look, he sent the others scattering. Elijah wasn't like the rest. There was something different about him, something wise, something almost peaceful. "You don't belong here, kid," he said, sitting across from Marcus. "But that don't mean you can't learn something while you're here." Marcus didn't understand what he meant. Learn from prison. All he wanted was to get out. But as days turned into weeks, he started to notice things. Whispers between guards, inmates who seemed to have more power than they should, secrets hidden in plain sight. Something about this place wasn't right. And the more he paid attention, the more he realized that his story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Marcus started noticing things that didn't add up. There were inmates who never seemed afraid, ones who walked through the prison like they owned it. Guards who looked the other way at the right moment. Conversations that stopped the second he got close. Elijah had warned him to stay quiet and observe, but the more Marcus watched, the more he felt something was wrong, like there were rules no one had told him about. One night, long after lights out, he heard voices outside his cell. A whispered argument between two guards. He wasn't supposed to talk, one of them hissed. And now he's asking questions. Marcus pressed himself against the cold wall, heart pounding. Who were they talking about? The next morning, the entire prison was on edge. An inmate, someone Marcus had seen in the yard just the day before, was gone. No explanation. No one even dared to mention his name. But Marcus caught the look on Elijah's face. He knew something. "Elijah, what's going on?" Marcus asked later that day, keeping his voice low. Elijah exhaled slowly, staring at the fence in the distance. "This place ain't just about serving time, kid. There are people in here who have more power than the ones wearing the badges." Marcus's mind raced. He thought he had been sent here because of a broken system, because no one cared about the truth. But what if it was more than that? What if someone wanted him in here on purpose? Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, his mother had found something, a missing piece. A detail buried in the case files that didn't make sense. And she wasn't the only one looking. The judge, the same one who had sentenced Marcus, had just received an anonymous letter. One that could change everything. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his conviction wasn't just a mistake, it was intentional. The more he watched, the more it became clear that certain inmates had protection, while others were silenced. And Elijah, the one person who seemed to understand the prison's hidden rules, was being watched. Late one night, Elijah slipped Marcus a small, folded note. "If something happens to me," he whispered, "don't let them scare you into silence." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Elijah walked away, disappearing into the dimly lit hallway. The next morning, Marcus woke to chaos. Guards rushed past his cell, their voices clipped and serious. By breakfast, the news had spread. Elijah was gone. No explanation, no body, just gone. Marcus felt his chest tighten. First the other inmate, now Elijah. It was clear. Someone was making people disappear. And if Elijah had been right about the power inside these walls, then Marcus knew he was next. Meanwhile, on the outside, his mother had uncovered something shocking. A witness who had been pressured to lie. A piece of evidence that was never presented in court. And at the center of it all, a name she recognized. The judge. At that very moment, the judge sat in his office, gripping the anonymous letter in his hands. It was simple, typed on plain paper, but the words made his blood run cold. Asterisk asterisk you sent an innocent boy away. Now, the truth is coming asterisk asterisk. Inside the prison, Marcus felt the shift. Guards watched him differently. Inmates who once ignored him now whispered as he passed. The walls were closing in, and as he lay awake that night, listening to footsteps outside his cell, he knew he was running out of time. Marcus lay still in his bunk, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The footsteps outside his cell slowed, then stopped. He held his breath. A key turned in the lock. The heavy door creaked open just enough for a shadow to slip inside. "Get up," a low voice ordered. Marcus hesitated, but something in the tone told him he had no choice. He stood, his muscles tense. The figure stepped closer. It was one of the guards, but not just any guard. It was Officer Daniels, one of the few who never looked Marcus in the eye. "You're being moved," Daniels said, his voice tight. "Why?" Marcus asked, his mind racing. Daniels didn't answer, just motioned for him to follow. Marcus had seen this happen before. Inmates taken in the middle of the night. They never came back. Every step through the dimly lit hallway felt heavier than the last. Marcus clenched his fists, ready for whatever was coming. But then, just as they turned the corner, another guard appeared. Not just any guard, Officer Graves, one of the ones always in the middle of things. "Where you taking him?" Graves asked, his voice casual but sharp. Daniels didn't answer fast enough. Graves' eyes narrowed. "That's what I thought," he muttered. Then, in a flash, he grabbed Marcus by the arm and shoved him into an empty storage room. "Stay here. Don't move," he whispered before stepping back outside and slamming the door shut. Marcus stood frozen in the darkness, his breath shaky. He wasn't sure who to trust, but something was clear. Someone wanted him out of the way, and someone else wanted him alive. The only question was why. Meanwhile, outside the prison, the judge stared at his office door. A second letter had arrived. Asterisk asterisk we know what you did. It's too late to hide asterisk asterisk. Marcus stood in the darkness of the storage room, every second stretching into eternity. His mind raced. Who was trying to get rid of him? And why had Graves saved him? He pressed his ear against the door, listening. Voices, footsteps, then silence. Minutes passed before the door creaked open again. Graves slipped inside, his expression tense. "You need to listen to me, kid," he said in a low voice. "You weren't supposed to be here. Somebody wanted you locked up, but now things are changing." Before Marcus could respond, Graves pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to him. "Your mother's been digging. She found proof." Marcus unfolded the paper, his hands shaking. It was a copy of an official report, evidence that had been buried during his trial. A key witness had been paid off. His fingerprints had never matched. And the most shocking part, the judge himself had connections to the very people who wanted Marcus convicted. Suddenly, alarms blared through the prison. Inmates shouted. Guards ran past the room, their radios crackling. Something big was happening. Graves peered out the door, then turned back. "It's time," he said. "You're getting out." Meanwhile, outside the prison, Marcus's mother stormed into a packed courtroom. Clutching the same evidence Graves had given Marcus, she faced the judge, her voice shaking but strong. "You sent my son away for something he didn't do. And now the whole world is about to know the truth." The judge paled. His secrets were unraveling. And just as he opened his mouth to respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Federal agents swarmed in. "Judge Lawson," one of them announced, "you're under arrest." Back in the prison, Marcus took his first steps toward freedom, but just as he reached the gates, a final thought hit him. If the judge was part of something bigger, who else was involved? And more importantly, who would try to stop the truth from coming out next? As Marcus stepped through the prison gates, the weight of the past year pressed against his chest. The sky felt bigger than he remembered, the air fresher. His mother was there, waiting, her eyes filled with tears. This time, not from pain but from relief. He barely had time to take a breath before she wrapped him in her arms. "You're free," she whispered. The ride home was quiet. The world had moved on while he was locked away, but Marcus felt like time had frozen inside him. He had lost a year of his life, but the truth had finally come out. The judge's arrest sent shockwaves through the system, exposing corruption that went beyond just his case. Other convictions were now being questioned, other stories being heard. But freedom didn't mean forgetting. Marcus couldn't shake the faces of the men still behind those walls. Some guilty, some not, but all trapped in a system that wasn't built to protect them. He thought of Elijah, of the warning he had given him. This place ain't just about serving time. Now, Marcus understood. Weeks later, he stood in front of a microphone, facing a crowd that had gathered to hear his story. "I lost a year of my life," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not gonna stay silent. There are more people like me, people who deserve justice." The crowd erupted in applause, but Marcus wasn't thinking about the cheers. He was thinking about the fight ahead. He had survived something meant to break him, and now he had a choice: walk away or stand up for those who couldn't. Looking out at the faces before him, he knew his story wasn't over. It was just the beginning of something bigger.